All right. Hey, I'm Jen Shotwell, your new borderline therapist. Check out jenshotwell.com for all the resources. I also have something through Thinkific, YouTube, podcasts, and all. So, all right, the message I want to talk about today is getting lost in the individual diagnoses of personality disorders. So there are 10 personality disorders, if I'm remembering correctly. And there's 3 different clusters. So my big advice, if you're been diagnosed with personality disorders, looking into it or just looking into it for somebody else, it is way more important to be focused on, are you cluster A, cluster B, cluster C, than is it to be actually schizoid, dependent, avoidant, borderline narcissist. So even within the clusters, you typically end up having a primary, secondary, and tertiary. Forever you want to say that. That's how I decided to say it. And so even for me, sometimes like when I take my assessments or I meet with mental health people, narcissism comes out first. Sometimes it's borderline, sometimes it's antisocial. Histrionic is my last. Same thing with my cluster C personality disordered clients. They may come across as dependent, then avoidant, then OCPD, maybe backwards. So instead of getting lost in, am I borderline? Am I histrionic? Am I narcissist? Get lost and deep dive into, am I cluster A, B, C? And honestly, like, the label isn't that important. Do whatever one makes you feel the most connected to your symptoms and your coping skills. Because the other thing I'll add in is whenever somebody says, like, don't worry about the label, I mean it in like an intricate way of 1, 2, is it borderline narcissistic, histrionic? But when people say, like, why do you care about a label to begin with, which is something else people say whenever I tell them I'm kind of coming out to them as borderline, we don't sit around and decide or talk about, I'm going to say it over again. We don't sit around and talk about, should we label cancer? The same way in which we label medical diseases because it helps us identify the issues, the problems, and the cure is the same reason why a lot of people feel connected to labeling their mental health disorder. If your client or you doesn't want to do it, then don't label it. But to tell somebody else that labeling it isn't a part of their treatment or solution would be the same thing as saying, like, I don't know why you have to have a cancer diagnosis. Why do you always talk about the fact that you have cancer? When something is a part of you, and literally personality disorders are it's our personality and it disorders our life. It is who we are. And so finding labels is also typically very freeing for personality disordered people. So stay within your cluster, label it whatever you want within that. That's most important versus spending the nitty gritty in between each diagnosis individually. So now you know.